When it comes to writing and storytelling, you'll face two main difficulties. The first is remaining consistent. This should be solved by pursuing a goal, by pursuing an idea which entices you to follow it. The second is to find these ideas. A map, any kind of visual representation, will grant you landmarks, will grant you visual information, and this visual information will help you to find ideas more easily. Because your maps are meant to be clear, yet complex enough, you are likely to enjoy them, to enjoy looking at them, to enjoy drawing them, to enjoy being with them as if they were characters in itself. They are the first step to turning your worlds into characters. Because they are clearly defined, because what you can do inside of them is clearly defined. You limit your possibilities, and limiting your possibilities, again if possible, to 2 to 3 choices, grants you the freedom to evolve in a flexible enough manner while removing most of the hesitation. The fact that you know which places are the most important, what you can find in these places, who you can find in these places, and what's their purpose, what's their role, what's their function in this world, will allow you to improvise more easily. Each of the issues in your stories, each of the characters in your story, the stakes linked to these characters, are directly related to the resources you'll find in a geolocation, the people you'll find in a geolocation. Finally, if your map is clear and complex enough, it will allow you to make your world evolve in a more sustainable way. You can present this world as a familiar place, while at the same time keeping it entertaining, keeping it interesting for the characters, the public, and yourself. In order to find ideas more easily, you want your maps to be as immersive as possible. Immersion is a result. It is the result of the balance of 2 elements: surprise and familiarity. Each of these 2 elements will allow you to create a new location, to present a new location, and then to create attachment to this location, or to play on the piggyback effect, to stimulate the initial attachment which was possible with this place before even your character get into it, just by comparing places. Every time your characters visit a new location or they return to a location, they'll be surprised, there'll be some change, but they may already know this location, even if they have never visited it. Remember, all your characters come from somewhere. All your characters originate from somewhere. And during their journey, they'll compare this place, the place they're born in, with every other place they're visiting. So by observing their surroundings, your characters will quite easily find the resemblance between their original home and this new place. We'll be able to, because your maps, again, your maps and therefore your worlds are clear enough to be understood, to be analyzed quite quickly. So in their surrounding, we'll be able to identify the role and the function of each element. If there's a commercial block, for example, be able to identify it quite easily because of the furniture, because of the activity, because of the dialogues, because of the people who are there. The fact that your characters and therefore your public as well is easily able to identify their surrounding will create more synergy between the different locations in your world. And now synergy serve just the purpose you want it to serve. Synergy creates continuity. And continuity can be seen as a form of cohesion, a geographical, a territorial form of cohesion. Continuity ensures that two parts of your world, or more, but at least two parts of your world, are linked by their role, by their function, and by their structure. This continuity, this visual cohesion between role, function, and structure ensures a smoother passage between two zones, between two areas. And then these passages will themselves be experienced as new familiar locations. You want to treat your areas of your habitations, your settlement, as areas in themselves, but also the way between them. The roads, the bridges, the different passages between two different areas will gradually disappear. This feeling that it is only a corridor between two real zones will gradually disappear if your continuity is good enough, if your continuity is able to display this smoothness, in the journey. Synergy between the different elements of your world, between the different elements of your map, if properly established, will allow you to improvise with more ease. But more important than that, it will allow the public and the character to accept your new ideas more easily, to appropriate themselves these new ideas, because the whole world, as it is now presented, seems to function as one unit. Now we'll start building our regional maps. If we get back to our world map, we can select one area, any area on the map, and try to figure out how we can specify the atmosphere of this area. Now, let's start with the area in purple, for example. We defined previously that this was an industrial area. This is the industrial heart of this world. Now, what are you supposed to find in an industrial area? Lots of buildings. No, you can't find or you're not supposed to find a lot of nature. Again, that's just establishing expectations. So you're supposed to have a lot of building. You may want to have your factory workers to live in the area for the sake of ergonomy, for the sake of efficiency. You may want to provide them everything they need just right inside the area, so they don't have to go too far and they can focus more on the work. You can provide them commerces, places of trade, food, any form of services really they need, any form of basic services plus entertainment, because you want your worker to be entertained, so this way they can focus more on their work. So let's take the purple area first for our first example. Here we have the simplest map possible, the simplest composition possible. All you have here is the main color reminding you in which area you're. So the area must be mainly made out of purple. So it is a vacant lot, an undefined territory, a piece of land which is about to be affected to a specific use, a specific function, a specific role. Now, to affect this land, this territory, to this specific functional role, you'll need facilities, you'll need installations, you'll need objects, tools. But before that, let's get a feeling of the terrain. the land as it is, absolutely vacant. But you can remark that in the top right corner, you have light coming from the territory in red, from the land in red, which is here reminds you that the land in purple, the industrial land, is directly linked to the land in red. The land which we know as is built on a mountain, is built on hills and as a mine. So it reminds you of the direct link, the synergy between these two territories. If one land, the land in red and orange, extracts the ore, extracts the raw material, it is then treated, it is then refined in the land in purple, which has all the installations. Now we've defined the atmosphere. Let's place some buildings. We can place a first simple building in the opposite direction of where the sun is, of where the light is. Now, and you can already realize that this building is really just integrated in its environment. It's plain, it's simple, it's only meant to be functional. But there's a certain sense of aesthetic to it, there's this sense of simplicity. This building may look refined in a way because it is so simple. Now, it can act as an habitation building, the workers of the factory can live here and they can work here, it can be a hybrid building. Now, let's add another one. By adding a second building, we're starting to create a sense of communication between these two buildings. What are the relationships between the characters habiting these two buildings? You have to start realizing that these characters are gonna create relationships. Let's start the third one. Now we have 3 buildings, and depending if your characters, the people of this world, live in these buildings, there's a sense of community created here. The character living in these buildings, the people living in these buildings, are highly likely to interact with each other because of the distances. They're all living along the same road. Let's add a last building now. Here you see this last building that you can only see the top of it. Is supposed to frame the picture. Just like the sun in the back frames the picture, just like the road frames the picture, this last building, the building which is on the foremost, just on the right, on the bottom right of the screen, is framing the picture. These 3 elements are helping you to limit your picture, to limit your environment. Now, if someone watches this image just as a map, we can think, okay, I have 3 kinds of elements here. I have the road which is the main way of communication between all these buildings. I have the buildings themselves, and I have the environment, the flat land and the sun. And all these 3 elements indicate me that this land is quite a simple land. I won't lose myself here because it's quite simple. There's only 4 buildings. This land is meant to be functional. This territory is meant to be functional. And judging by the position of the building, the people in the building are supposed to interact with each other. So these are the 3 main pieces of information here you can get from this composition. Now for our second example, let's try a region between the spaces of our world, the zone of our world. Let's suppose we have a small island, right here, at the border between the land in red and the land in blue. So we have this island here, a small floating island. Now, how would this island be? Because this island should contain some elements of the world in blue, the world in red, and potentially the world in green as well. Not necessarily the world in purple, because the world in purple would be very far below this, but it is placed between the world in blue and the world in red. And we can suppose it contains some elements of the world in green, because the world in green is floating over the rest of our world. So this small island, which is situated here between our world in red, blue and green, should contain to some degree elements of these three worlds. Now here's an example of what this floating island may look like. You realize immediately that this island contains elements of the world in red, in blue, and in green. That was our first objective. Now, what else can we see? This island displays a new color. A part of this island is neither red, neither blue, or neither green, indicating an external element, an element which can be found in any of these three worlds. So this element here, this zone, is alien to every and each of these three worlds. Now, for the elements of the world in red, we can realize that we have a small construction in red here. And this construction looks like an habitation. It looks like it could contain people who are living there. We realize that the world here also contain spheres, blue spheres. Blue spheres that seems to be encapsulated inside another larger structure. These blue spheres are, in a sense, captured by this other structure. Third point we have here is this structure in green. Now the structure seems to be half habitation, there seems to be, with the light green structure, some form of buildings, stairs. There's a sphere on the bottom as well, and a natural part made of trees and what seems to be a small hill or a small mountain. Now, the most remarkable element in this map, in this small regional map, is the fact that the island itself, the floating island, seems to have a face, or what may look like a face. You may distinguish a small eye. You may distinguish a small, a large mouth. You may consider that those spikes coming from the mountain, which was detached, because it's a floating island now, but it may have been part of an ancient mountain, which was part of the land here. So the part of this island contains teeth. So it displays what really may be teeth, or maybe claws. Now this is the most remarkable part of this island, and it brings us back to our main principle. When it comes to creating environments, when it comes to creating characters, when it comes to creating organizations and objects, you have to balance surprising and familiar. Now, the familiar parts in this map are the construction, and to some degree, the small green mountain, the small green hill. So these are the familiar. This is the most mundane part of this picture, because there's nothing peculiar here except the fact maybe that the construction in red is on the edge really of the island, and it may not be that that sturdy. It may not be that resilient to shock, to damages, and it may crumble. But other than that, it's a regular construction. Same for the trees, same for the small hill. You may realize that we have stairs here. And the color of these stairs suggests that the person or the organization who built these stairs is the same person or organization which built the habitation, the tower in the bottom. Now, you want to make use of color as much as you can. You want to make use of color as much as you can, especially if you have conflicting elements in your map, if you have multiple elements, because these elements may, well, create conflict. They may create, they may be a source of cooperation. All of these elements are acting according to what the other are supposed to do. No, their functions and their roles are supposed to act with one another. That's the continuity factor. And because you want to create this synergy between these multiple elements, you want to make use of color to give immediately a visual information. Now, if we get back slightly on the blue sphere, you may realize that most of the spheres are on this side of the island. But one of them isolated itself, just right here. And this lone sphere may indicate you that there are multiple kind of people, diverse kind of people living inside this sphere or living on these spheres. Same thing for the zone in red and the zone in green. Now, you may think of it as two different spaces because, well, they are two different spaces, and therefore two different kind of population may be living in the tower in red and the small settlement in green. Now, what about the larger part, the rock, which may be a living rock? Well, the island seems to be closed right now. The mouth seems to be closed. But can it be opened? Can you go inside the island? Are there people inside? Who are they? What are they doing inside? Why do they accept to shelter these other peoples on this island? Now, all of these are the questions you want to answer if you're creating on a story based on this environment. You may want, and you know, every time it's all about relationships. You want to establish relationships between these different kind of people. Why they still interact with each other? Why wouldn't they want to interact with each other? Which kind of conflict we'll face? Which kind of cooperation we have to come across? Because, for example, if the island here is particularly fragile, all these people, all these different people, will have to cooperate to preserve their island. They'll have to cooperate to preserve the stability of their island. So that's the synergy and relationship part put together. Create visual contrast through color to give information about the different people who live in a definite location. Let's get back to our world map one last time to find a third example, a third way to create a diverse location. A location which is situated between two worlds. Now, let's imagine we have a location right here. So we'll have the opposite kind of example now, and compared to the last one. The last example was a floating island. Now, let's suppose we have a territory which is underwater, which is located in the depths of this sea, almost at a level where it's about to reach the underground of the world. So let's try to create a world which is between the depths of the sea and the depths of the earth. As you create your compositions, as you create your regional maps, and as you create your world maps as well, you always want to articulate two things: visual contrast and thematic contrast. Now, for the visual contrast here, you may realize that we're getting from a first example. Our first example was a simple road, and this simple road was really clear visually. You can identify the forms quite easily, you can identify the areas quite easily, the colors quite easily. To a more vague example, with the floating island, with more and more surprising elements, more alien element, less common element, more surprising element. To our last example here, where it becomes even difficult to analyze the shapes and the forms properly. But now remember our context. Remember why we want it to be this way. We are in the depths. We are underwater. We're almost at a level so deep that we're reaching the underground here, symbolized by our two colors and our two gradients of colors. Now, what does it mean? It means that light doesn't have the same value here. Now, compared to a world which was at ground floor level and a world which was floating, here we're at a level which light doesn't have much effect. So our perception of forms and shape is largely altered. However, we can still distinguish color to some degree. Light still have an effect. You know, if you observe the shapes here, the forms here, you can distinguish the edges. You know, you can distinguish discontinued edges of each of the objects we have here. But before that, beforehand, you can see two colors. You can distinguish clearly two colors. And these two colors are directly related to our two worlds, connecting with each other, trying to function in synergy, and having maybe some difficulty to function with one another. So what do we have here? We have our part in cyan, or light blue. And this part here seems to be resting on the part in purple. Now, why is the part in purple under? Well, because the part in purple is supposed to represent the world in purple, which going deeper now, our perception has changed a lot thanks to this new map. The world in purple is getting even deeper now, because the earth is getting deeper than the sea here. So a part of our world in blue, which was submerged, is reposing on a part of our world in purple. Now, what does it mean about, regarding the interaction between these two worlds? It means that the world in blue and the world in purple may have been originally more connected than what the world map shows us now. The world map shows us that these two worlds are adjacent. They are related to some degree, but we don't see much connection between them in the world map. The world map displays much more connection between the world in purple and the world in red, for example, or more connection between the world in green and the world in blue, but not so much between blue and purple. Now, how does blue and purple connect with each other? If we try to look at the shape and, more than look, try to imagine what the shape could have been, because it's underwater, much more pressure, so the whole structure has been largely altered. What could all of this have been? Let's suppose that it's a sunken city, a crumbled city. The buildings here have been crushed, they've been deformed, they've been destroyed maybe by physical action, chemical action, and now there's only a rubble left. There's only a ruin left at the bottom of the sea. So you have a shape, large shape. If you're really watching, trying to imagine what this large shape could be, you can start to see that we have a larger form, a broader form, which is the combination of blue and purple. And this broader form may look to you, if you're imagining this whole shape, it may look like a creature. It may look like a living being, with its head here, top of its back, something resting on the back, on the body of the beast. Its body here, and even the beast here is crouching also. Even the beast has been crushed, has been stamped. The body of this creature has been hammered by pressure, by temperature, by the time pattern. Now, all of this is supported here by the fact that this beast, if it is a beast, which was supporting a city, is now living in a place where you have lots of current. All these flow in blue and purple are currents, and these currents are assailing this construction or this creature right now. They're assailing it. They're continuing to pressure it, to apply a massive duress on it. And all this current, all these currents may seem to emerge from this entity here. There's one little thing actually here, which seems to be the origin of the current, which seems to be the origin of the pressure applied on this creature, on this city, on this construction. Now, changing of environment, changing of perspective, gives you more information on the history of your world. So, for example, here, getting underwater shows us a part of our world we wouldn't have imagined beforehand. Getting underwater shows us the relationship between two nations, maybe, which were formerly allies, and whose a crisis has separated. Now, which kind of crisis was it? Why did this crisis separate them if they were allied, so allied that they create maybe a conjoined city, a conjoined even creature? If they created this creature together, what would have been this crisis that separated them? These are the questions you want to ask yourself if you're trying to deploy a story around this part of your world.